I've been a landlord for over 20 years, owned a small 6-unit apartment building in upstate New York, nothing fancy, built in the 1940s, and I've seen plenty of odd things over the years. Tenants who disappeared owing rent, people who left behind strange junk, even once had someone try to keep chickens on the balcony, but nothing ever unsettled me the way the man in Unit 6B did. He moved in on a cold day in November, didn't say much, paid cash up front for 6 months, seemed polite enough. Middle-aged, thin, always wearing a long coat no matter the weather, but the first thing that bothered me was how he insisted I never enter his unit. Not for maintenance, not for inspections, said he'd handle everything himself, and at first I agreed because the cash was good and he didn't cause trouble, but after a few months, the other tenants started complaining about noises at night, strange metallic tapping sounds, like someone working with tools on the walls or pipes, sometimes between 2 and 4 in the morning. I asked him about it, he smiled a little and said, "Just projects to pass the time," and shut the door before I could say more. Then came the smell, a weird chemical scent that would come and go, sharp and sweet at the same time, not like smoke or gas, but something I couldn't place, and no matter how much I tried to track it, it always seemed strongest outside 6B. I left notes, knocked, called his number, but he never answered after that, though the rent kept arriving in. Envelopes slid under my office door. One night, one of my other tenants, an elderly woman in 6A, called me in a panic saying there was a light shining through the crack under her door, coming from 6B's apartment across the hall, and when she looked through the peephole she swore she saw him standing there, just standing and staring at her door with that same faint smile. I came over right away, but by the time I got there, the hall was dark, quiet, like nothing had happened, and when I knocked on 6B, no answer. Finally I decided enough was enough, that I had to enter and see what was going on, but the night before I planned to give formal notice, I was woken at 3 a.m. by the building alarm and the tenants all outside in the cold, pointing at the upstairs window, 6B's window, which was wide open, curtain blowing in the wind, but no light inside, no sign of the tenant, just that smell stronger than ever. And when I went up with the master key, heart racing, and opened the door, what I saw inside made me stop cold in the doorway and question everything I thought I understood about people and the tenants I rent to. The first thing that hit me wasn't what I saw. It was the cold, not the kind of cold from an open window, but a deep, unnatural chill that felt like stepping into a basement no one had entered in decades. And as I forced myself inside I realized the apartment was nearly empty. No furniture except a wooden chair facing the middle of the room. No bed, no table, no signs of normal living, just walls covered in drawings. Hundreds of them, sheets of paper pinned up, taped up, layered over each other. All done in black ink or pencil, and they were all of the same thing. A door, always the same door, a tall, narrow door with no handle, standing in the middle of an empty space, sometimes drawn open with blackness spilling out, sometimes closed but surrounded by strange shapes or symbols I didn't recognize. The floor was covered in them too, scattered pages curling at the edges, some stained with what looked like rust or something darker, and in the center of the room, where the chair faced, was one single drawing larger than the rest, taped across the entire wall, showing that same door but this time with a figure standing beside it, tall and thin, with hollow eyes and hands too long to be human, and what stopped me cold was the face. The face in the drawing was smiling that same faint smile I'd seen on my tenant, the man from 6B. I wanted to leave, to call the police, to do anything but stay there, but as I turned, I noticed something else. The smell, that chemical sweet rot, was strongest near the closet door, the only other door in the place besides the entry, and when I opened it slowly, the light from the hallway spilled in and showed me something I still try not to think about. Inside wasn't a closet at all but a hollow space where the back wall had been smashed through, leading into pure darkness beyond, like the tenant had broken into some hidden part of the building that shouldn't exist. And as I stood there trying to see into the black, I swear I heard the faintest sound, a soft scraping, like nails on stone, coming from deep inside. I should have left right then. I knew that every part of me was screaming to get out of that apartment, but something about that hollow space behind the closet wall kept me frozen, like if I looked away, whatever was in there would step out into the room, and the longer I stared into that blackness, the more I felt like I wasn't standing in my building anymore, like the air had changed, heavy and damp and old, the kind of air you get deep underground where no light belongs. And that scraping sound, it didn't stop, it got slower, more deliberate, like whoever or whatever was in there knew I was listening, knew I was standing just feet from it, and then I noticed something else, faint but clear, the smell of matches, sulfur, that sharp bite of something just burned, and I realized the tenant must have lit candles or lamps in there at some point because on the floor near the hole were charred stubs and a circle of black wax stains. And among them, scattered like fallen teeth, were small carvings of wood or bone, marked with the same symbols as the drawings on the walls. I backed away, heart racing, and as I did, I saw on the inside of the closet door, scratched deep into the wood, almost down to the grain, were words that made my stomach twist. "Don't open it again." That's when I heard a sound I will never forget. The soft creak of the apartment's front door slowly shutting behind me, though I had left it wide open, and when I spun around the door clicked closed as if pushed gently, and in that instant the apartment felt smaller, like the walls had drawn closer, like whatever was inside that dark hollow was waiting for me to make my next move. I don't know how long I stood there staring between the closet and the front door, breathing so shallow I felt dizzy, because it felt like if I made a sound, if I moved too fast, I'd wake something that was just barely asleep in that hollow space. But eventually instinct kicked in and I turned the knob, trying to open the front door as quietly as I could, heart pounding so loud I was sure it echoed through the apartment, but the knob wouldn't turn. The door that had swung shut so easily now felt like it was bolted from the outside, and the temperature in the room kept dropping, my breath starting to fog, and that scraping sound inside the hole grew louder, closer, like whatever had been hidden in the dark was crawling, inch by inch, toward the opening, and that's when the apartment filled with a sound so soft and so strange that I thought for a moment I was imagining it. Humming, low and tuneless, coming from both the hollow space and the walls themselves, like the whole room was resonating with the sound, and the drawings on the walls seemed to ripple in the dim light like they weren't paper anymore but fabric blowing in a breeze I couldn't feel, and I realized I could smell something new now, earth, damp and cold, like a grave left open too long, and then the light bulb in the ceiling flickered and went out, leaving me in darkness with only the faint glow of the hallway through the crack under the front door, and the sense that I wasn't alone, that whatever the man in 6B had been trying to keep inside that space had finally decided it was time to come out. I don't remember deciding to move, but somehow I was backing toward the window, thinking maybe, just maybe, if I couldn't get out through the door I could break the glass, climb down the fire escape, get away from that impossible space behind the closet. But the closer I got to the window, the more the humming seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, through my shoes, through my bones, and it wasn't tuneless anymore. I could hear it forming into a kind of chant, low and slow and wrong words. That didn't sound like any language I'd ever heard, but filled my head like I'd known them all my life, and I realized with a sick kind of horror that the walls weren't just rippling anymore. The drawings were changing. The figure beside the door in every image was turning its head, its hollow eyes now fixed in my direction, and from the black of the closet space I could see the faintest glint of reflection like wet eyes just catching the last of the hallway light, watching, waiting, and then the scraping stopped altogether, the humming cut off like a breath held too long, and in that awful silence I heard the soft click of the closet door starting to swing inward, slow and careful, as if whatever was inside wanted to see me just as badly as I didn't want to see it, and I pressed my back to the cold glass of the window, too afraid to look away, too afraid to blink, knowing that when that door finished opening I'd have no choice but to see what the man in 6B had spent so long trying to trap inside. The closet door creaked wider, inch by inch, and the darkness inside seemed thicker than it should have been, not just the absence of light but something dense, as if the shadows themselves had weight, and as I stared, heart-hammering, I saw a shape begin to take form, first just an outline in the black, then clearer, tall and thin like the figure in the drawings, its edges too sharp, its proportions wrong, and though it hadn't stepped forward, I felt like it was closer with every breath I took, as if looking at it pulled it toward me, and the cold in the room deepened until my teeth chattered and the glass behind me fogged from my own ragged breathing, and then I heard it again. Not the scraping, not the humming, but a voice low and close, like it was already in the room with me, and it whispered in a language I didn't know but understood anyway, words that sank into my mind like hooks. And what terrified me most was that part of me wanted to listen, wanted to step toward that awful space, like I'd been waiting for this moment all along, and just as the shape shifted as if readying itself to emerge fully, the sound of a distant siren outside broke the silence, and for a split second I thought I saw the figure hesitate, as if the noise reminded it of something, and in that breath I felt the spell break enough to move, my hand flying to the window latch, trying to force it open, but the paint was old and sealed it tight, and as I struggled I could hear the shape crossing the threshold of the closet, footfalls too soft for something that size, moving toward me in the dark. My fingers found the metal latch of the window, and with a surge of desperate strength I wrenched it free, the old paint cracking as the frame groaned open just enough for me to squeeze through, the freezing air outside hitting my face like a slap and snapping me out of whatever pull that thing had on me. And as I climbed onto the fire escape I dared one last glance into the room, heart hammering so loud it was all I could hear, and in that moment the shape stood there in the center of the room, fully out of the closet now, tall and terrible, a silhouette darker than the dark around it, watching me with those hollow glints where eyes should be, but it didn't follow, it just watched, and as I stumbled down the fire escape the apartment windows slammed shut behind me as if pushed by an unseen hand, the light inside snuffed out at once, leaving nothing but blackness behind the glass. I ran until I couldn't breathe, called the police from 2 blocks away, and when they arrived they found the apartment empty, no sign of the tenant, no sign of the broken wall or the hollow space, just a bare room with dust on the floor as if no one had lived there for years. I sold the building within the month, moved far from that city, but sometimes in the quietest hours of the night I swear I still hear that faint scraping sound, like nails on stone, coming from somewhere I can't quite find, as if it followed me, as if it's still waiting for me to open another door. I've been managing rental properties for almost 15 years, and while I've had my share of problem tenants, late rent, noise complaints, even one guy who tried to turn his unit into an unlicensed tattoo shop, none of them ever left me truly afraid until the woman in 4D, who moved into my smallest building on the edge of town, a quiet place mostly filled with retirees and long-term renters. And from the start she was odd but polite, paid her deposit in cash, said very little, didn't want to do a walkthrough, just signed the lease, took the keys, and moved in the same day with nothing but 2 suitcases and a large mirror wrapped in a sheet, which she carried up the stairs herself even though it looked heavy as hell. I didn't think much of it at first, but it was maybe 2 weeks later when other tenants started asking me if I'd rented the unit to someone else too because they'd hear her talking late at night, holding full conversations with someone, though no one ever saw a guest come or go. And when I checked the security footage there was never anyone with her, just the woman coming and going, always dressed in black, always wearing a scarf even in warm weather. I tried to ignore it but the complaints kept coming. Sounds of pacing at all hours, strange smells like burnt hair and something chemical, the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across the floor. And once a neighbor swore she heard crying followed by laughter that went on for nearly 10 minutes straight. Knocked on the door a few times to do wellness checks, but she never answered, though I could hear movement inside, slow, deliberate, as if whoever was in there was standing just on the other side of the door listening to me. Finally, I gave her notice for inspection, and on the day I went in with my spare key, the apartment was dark, the blinds all drawn, and the air inside cold and stale like a room sealed too long. But what really stopped me was the mirror, the same one I saw her carry in now. Set up in the middle of the living room, uncovered, cracked down the middle, and positioned in such a way that it reflected the whole room except, somehow, for me, like I wasn't there at all, and the walls were covered in symbols drawn in what looked like charcoal or maybe ash, circles and crosses and marks I didn't recognize, and the only thing she left behind was a note taped to the mirror that said, "Don't let it out." I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that cracked mirror and the strange symbols on the walls, trying to convince myself it was just some kind of breakdown or eccentricity, but the longer I looked, the harder it became to believe that, because the mirror didn't just fail to reflect me, it failed to reflect the room properly too. Parts of the space warped or stretched in ways that didn't match reality, like the reflection belonged to a different apartment altogether, one darker, emptier, and as I stepped closer I felt cold air coming from the crack in the glass itself, like the mirror wasn't just cracked but open, as if something on the other side was waiting for the right moment to slip through. And then I noticed the floorboards beneath it, worn in a perfect circle around where the mirror stood, like someone had been pacing there for hours, days, maybe longer, and the faintest smell of smoke hung in the air, though nothing was burning. And as I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob, I heard the faintest sound from behind me, like a breath or a whisper that came not from the apartment but from inside the mirror itself. And though I told myself not to, I looked back one last time, and in the fractured reflection I saw a shape I knew wasn't mine. Tall, thin, and far too close to the glass, as if it had been standing behind me the whole time. I don't know how long I stood frozen there, staring at that fractured reflection and the shape behind me that I couldn't feel but could somehow sense, like it was leaning closer, testing the boundary between whatever world that mirror belonged to and mine. And when I finally managed to break my gaze and step back, the apartment felt different, heavier, as if the very air had thickened, and the symbols on the walls seemed darker than before, smudged and smeared like they'd been touched or dragged by unseen hands. And the crack in the glass, God, the crack seemed wider, just barely, but enough that I could see a sliver of blackness behind it, blacker than any shadow should be in daylight, black like it swallowed the light of the room whole. And as I reached the door again, I thought I heard it, soft at first, then clearer, the same voice that must have left that note, the voice of the woman from 4D, not in the room but from the mirror, repeating over and over in a hoarse whisper, "Don't let it out, don't let it out, don't let it out," faster and faster, until the words blurred together in a chant that echoed in my head as I slammed the door behind me and stood shaking in the hallway, staring at the peeling paint and wondering what the hell had just looked back at me from the glass. I don't remember leaving the building, only that I found myself outside in the cold with my keys in my hand and my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. And for hours I sat in my truck across the street watching that dark window of 4D, half expecting to see the woman return, or the shape from the mirror staring back at me from behind the glass. But nothing happened, not a flicker of movement, not even the ripple of the curtain. And as night fell I realized I couldn't just leave it. Like that, couldn't let the next tenant walk in blind to whatever the hell I'd seen, so I grabbed my phone, convinced myself I'd go back up, document everything, maybe call someone, police, priest, anyone. But when I crossed the lot and stepped inside the building, the air felt colder, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. And as I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, I thought I heard that soft whisper again, faint, as if from far away, or maybe just inside my own head, but clear enough to chill me, a voice repeating, "Too late, too late, too late," in a tone so sad it hurt to hear. And when I reached the door to 4D, the knob was warm in my hand, and through the crack beneath the door came a flicker of light, like candlelight or a fire burning low, and I swear I saw, just for a second, the shadow of something tall moving slowly across the inside wall, pausing at the door as if it knew I was standing there, listening, waiting. I stood there with my hand on the knob, frozen between the instinct to run and the sick curiosity that kept me rooted to the spot, because the longer I waited, the clearer the shadow inside became, not sharp, not detailed, but unmistakably human-shaped, too tall and too still, like it wasn't moving so much as unfolding, stretching out of some place it didn't belong, and the light flickering beneath the door seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heart, faster and faster. And in that moment I realized the warmth of the doorknob wasn't natural. It felt like it had been held just seconds before, like whatever was inside had touched it, maybe even tried to open it, maybe still was, and that thought made me pull back. But as I did, I heard the voice again, closer now, clear as if whispered into my ear, "You can't leave it like this." And whether that was meant as a warning or a command, I'll never know. Because before I could decide what to do, the light inside dimmed to nothing. Shadow melted into the dark, and all that was left was the cold and the quiet, and the knowledge that whatever the woman in 4D had been trying to contain, I might have already waited too long to stop it from coming through. I don't know what pushed me to do it, but my fingers turned the knob almost without me thinking, slow and shaking, the door creaking open just enough for the stale, cold air inside to hit me, heavier than before, carrying that same smell of burnt wax and something else, something like wet stone or old earth. And as my eyes adjusted, I could make out the room, empty except for that mirror standing in the middle, the crack down its face wider now, jagged like a wound, and behind it the blackness seemed deeper, more alive, as if it had been waiting for me to open the door, and the faint glow of whatever light had been inside was gone, but I could still see just enough to notice that the marks on the walls had changed, the symbols smeared and dragged like fingers had clawed through them, and the floorboards beneath the mirror were splintered in places, like something had pressed up from underneath, and as I stood there frozen, the room felt wrong, not like a place in my building anymore, but like the entrance to somewhere else entirely. And then, so soft I almost didn't hear it, came that voice again, the one I thought belonged to the woman, only now it sounded different, emptier, hollow, whispering, "It sees you." In that moment, something in me broke through the fear, maybe instinct, maybe sheer desperation, but I stepped fully into the room, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the soft creaks of the old floorboards beneath my feet, and I grabbed the edge of the mirror, meaning to pull it down, to smash it, to do anything to stop whatever was pressing against the crack in that glass, but the surface felt like ice, burning cold against my skin, and before I could move again, the crack split wider with it, sound like a scream trapped in stone, and for a heartbeat I saw it. Not just a shadow, but a shape, tall and thin and wrong, its face like stretched wax, its eyes endless black, reaching through as if the glass was water. But as it did, the symbols on the walls flared with sudden light, pale and flickering, like embers from a dying fire, and the mirror shuddered, the crack collapsing in on itself with a terrible final snap that echoed through the room, and then all at once the cold was gone. The room was dark and still, and I was left standing alone, shaking, with the shattered remains of the mirror at my feet. I left that apartment that night, locked the door, and never opened it again, and though I sold the building within months, moved states away, and tried to forget, there are nights I still dream of that crack in the glass, and wake with the feeling that something, somewhere, is still watching me through it. I've owned my duplex for over a decade, lived upstairs, rented out the bottom unit, never had much trouble except for the usual late rent here and there, the odd complaint about noise. But 2 years ago I rented to a man who called himself Simon, quiet, mid-30s maybe, pale, dark hair, Didn't give a lot of details, but handed over first and last month's rent in cash and moved in that same night with nothing but 2 duffel bags and a large, rolled-up rug that looked heavy enough. I offered to help, but he refused, said he had it covered, and from the start there was something about him I couldn't place. Maybe the way he avoided eye contact, or how he always kept the blinds shut no matter the time of day. At first I didn't think much of it, but within weeks I started hearing things. Soft thudding from below late at night, like someone dropping something heavy over and over, faint murmuring like a one-sided conversation, sometimes laughter at strange hours, and it wasn't just me. Neighbor next door asked if I was running a business out of the lower unit, said she'd seen lights flickering on and off at odd hours and people standing at the back door who didn't belong, but every time I went down to check or knock to see if everything was all right, the place would fall silent, and Simon would answer the door calm and polite, saying everything was fine, he was just a night owl, nothing to worry about. I let it go until the smell started, faint at first, like damp earth, then stronger, something sour and metallic that seemed to seep up through my floorboards, and when I asked him about it he smiled for the first time since I met him, but it wasn't reassuring, it was tight, like he was holding something back, and he just said, "Sometimes things have to settle before they stop making noise," and shut the door. After that the sounds grew stranger, scraping, dragging, and once what I swear was a single knock from the inside of my closet, directly above where his living room should be, and the worst part is I started noticing the ground around the back of the property, near his unit's entrance, looked disturbed, like someone had been digging and then trying to cover it up in a hurry, and as much as I told myself to mind my business, I knew something wasn't right, especially the night I saw him standing outside in the rain at 3 a.m., barefoot, head tilted back, just staring at my window like he was waiting for me to notice. I wanted to believe I imagined it, that the rain and the dark had played tricks on me, but the next morning I saw the muddy prints where he'd been standing, right below my window, and worse, prints leading back around the house toward that patch of disturbed earth near the basement door, and from that day the sounds from below became harder to ignore, thumps that shook the walls, the faint echo of something like chanting too low to make out the words, and once I could have sworn I heard a woman's voice down there, soft and strained, as if trying to call out but not quite able to, and when I confronted Simon again, demanded to know what was going on, he didn't even open the door, just spoke through it, voice calm and steady, telling me it was safer if I stayed upstairs and let him handle things his way, that he wouldn't be my tenant much longer, and that soon the house would be quiet again. After that, I started locking my bedroom door at night, though I couldn't say why, just the feeling that the boundary between upstairs and downstairs had gotten thinner, that whatever he was doing or keeping down there was getting closer, and when the smell came back, stronger than ever, I finally decided I'd had enough, called a friend on the force, asked him to come by the next night, but before he could, I woke to a sound that still haunts me, the sound of my basement door at the top of the stairs unlatching, slow and careful, like someone was trying not to wake me, and as I lay there in the dark I swore I heard Simon's voice again, right on the other side of the door, whispering, "You shouldn't have called for help." I lay frozen, barely daring to breathe, staring at that door in the faint light spilling through the window blinds, half expecting to see the knob start to turn, but it didn't, not then, not yet. Instead the whispering stopped and the house fell into a silence so deep it made my ears ring, and then came a new sound, softer, but somehow worse, a slow dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floorboards downstairs, moving from one end of the unit to the other, then pausing beneath my bedroom, then starting again, and the smell grew thicker, sickly sweet now, clinging to the back of my throat, and I don't know what possessed me, but I got up, moved to the window, thinking maybe I could see something outside that would explain any of this, but what I saw made my stomach drop. Simon, barefoot in the yard again, standing motionless in the same spot below my window, head tilted up, staring at me through the dark, but this time I wasn't sure it was rain making his hair hang in. clumps or something else, and his mouth was moving fast, like he was speaking or chanting, but I couldn't hear the words, and when I backed away I heard it, the sound I dreaded most, the creak of that basement door opening at last, slow, steady, as if whatever had been waiting below had decided it was time to come up. I could hear each creak of the basement door as it opened wider, the hinges groaning like they hadn't moved in years even though I knew they had, and in that awful stillness I realized the dragging sound had stopped, replaced by something even worse. A soft tapping, like fingertips or nails on the inside of the stairwell walls, slow and deliberate, getting closer with every second, and from the yard Simon was still standing there, his face pale in the moonlight, his lips moving faster now, hands lifted slightly like he was trying to hold something back or summon it closer, I couldn't tell, and I wanted to run, to grab my keys and get out, but my legs wouldn't move. My body felt rooted to the floor as I watched the handle of my bedroom door twitch just once, as if whatever was at the top of the stairs was testing it, and then I heard my name, not shouted, not spoken, but breathed out in that same strained voice I thought I'd heard through the floor before, a woman's voice, desperate and broken, as if begging me for something I didn't understand, and the smell in the house was unbearable now, like rot and earth and something burnt long ago but never fully gone. And as I stood there shaking I realized that if I didn't act soon, if I didn't do something, whatever was down there wasn't going to stop at the door this time. I don't know what force kept me standing there, heart racing so loud it drowned out almost every other sound, but I couldn't look away from that door, couldn't stop listening to that tapping, slower now, like whoever or whatever was behind it knew I was frozen, knew I wasn't going to run, and then came a soft scrape, like nails or fingertips sliding down the wood, followed by that same voice again, closer, clearer, saying my name and then something else, something too quiet to catch, but it chilled me deeper than the cold night air ever could, and outside Simon's chanting rose higher, faster, words I couldn't understand pouring from him like a tide as he rocked back and forth beneath my window, his eyes wide, staring at something I couldn't see, and then the basement door creaked fully open, the sound echoing up through the house, and I felt the shift in the air, heavy and thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath for what came next, and I knew with every part of me that whatever Simon had brought here, whatever he had woken or called up, had finally decided it no longer needed his permission to come upstairs. The tapping stopped then, and for a few heartbeats there was only the sound of Simon's frantic voice outside, rising and falling in some rhythm that felt too old, too wrong, to belong to any language I knew, and I was about to back away, to break whatever hold kept me there, when I saw it, the handle of my bedroom door begin to turn, slow and deliberate, like whoever was on the other side was savoring the moment. And in that instant I knew it wasn't Simon, it wasn't some stranger, it wasn't anyone living at all. And the air grew so cold my breath fogged the glass of the window, and still I stood there, unable to move, watching as the door opened just a crack, enough for the dark beyond to spill in like smoke, and from that blackness came a single, soft sound. Something between a sigh and a sob, close enough I felt it in my bones, and as I stared into that crack I could see it, a shape, not fully formed, not fully there, but real enough that its hollow eyes met mine, and outside. Simon's chanting broke off into a long, ragged scream that echoed through the night like something had finally answered him back. In that moment, instinct finally took over, and I slammed the bedroom door shut with all the force I had, throwing the lock just as the shape beyond lunged forward, the sound of its weight hitting the wood like a thunderclap that shook the walls, and from the yard Simon's scream cut off so suddenly the silence that followed felt worse than the noise, thick and heavy and waiting, and I backed away from the door, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst, grabbing my phone with shaking hands to call for help. But before I could, the air shifted, the cold receded, and I heard the slow creak of the basement door shutting again, as if whatever had come up the stairs had changed its mind, or been called back, or maybe decided to wait for another time. By the time the police arrived, Simon was gone, vanished into the night, no trace of him in the yard, no prints in the mud, and when they searched the basement, there was nothing out of place, nothing disturbed, except the smell, faint now but still there, of earth and rot and something older that didn't belong. And though I sealed the door, sold the house, and moved across the state within a month, some nights I still wake up to the sound of a door creaking open in the dark, and I wonder if what Simon brought into that house ever really stayed behind.